I arrived at my daughter's wedding late, just in time to hear her toast. Thank God she didn't come. I quietly left the reception hall, my heels clicking against the marble floor like a countdown to revenge. The next morning, I began digging through 30 years of secrets that would destroy everything Melanie thought she'd built. Before we begin, subscribe and let me know where you're watching. Let me tell you how I became the uninvited guest at my own daughter's wedding. I'm Dorothy Winters, though most people call me Dot. I'm 62, widowed for 3 years, and apparently expendable according to my only child. The invitation had arrived 6 weeks late, accidentally, sent to my old address. When I called Melanie about it, she sighed like I'd interrupted brain surgery. "Oh, Mom, I thought Tyler's mother had contacted you. We're keeping it small, immediate family only." "I am immediate family," I'd said. "Well, obviously, but with the venue restrictions and everything being so expensive." Her voice trailed off in that way it always did when she was lying. I should have seen the signs then. Should have noticed how she never mentioned my role in the ceremony, never asked for help with planning, never even told me what color to wear so I wouldn't clash with her precious aesthetic. But I'd been busy grieving Harold and trying to rebuild my life. My husband's death had left me with more money than I'd ever expected. Life insurance, his pension, savings we'd accumulated over 40 years of marriage. Melanie had been helpful during those dark months, almost attentive, taking care of paperwork, organizing finances, making sure I was comfortable. I'd thought we were finally becoming close. The wedding was held at the Riverside Country Club, the kind of place that costs more for one evening than most people make in 6 months. I slipped in through a side entrance, wearing the navy dress I'd bought specially for the occasion. The ceremony was already over, and guests were mingling during cocktail hour. I spotted Melanie immediately. She looked stunning in her grandmother's vintage lace dress, my mother's dress that she'd claimed from my closet 6 months ago. "For sentimental reasons," she'd said. Apparently sentiment didn't extend to inviting the woman who'd preserved that dress for 30 years. Tyler looked handsome beside her, genuinely happy. I'd always liked my son-in-law. He was honest, hard-working, the kind of man who still opened doors and remembered birthdays. Too good for Melanie, if I'm being honest, though I'd never say that out loud. I hung back by the bar, watching my daughter work the room like the skilled lawyer she was. She had Harold's charm when she wanted to use it, his ability to make people feel important. She just rarely used it on me anymore. The dinner bell rang, and guests moved into the reception hall. I found an empty chair at a table in the back, behind a decorative pillar where I could observe without being noticed. The couple sat at the head table, surrounded by their wedding party. Friends I didn't recognize, cousins from Tyler's side, college roommates who'd known Melanie longer than some family members. There was no chair saved for me anywhere. The best man gave his speech first, something about college adventures and Tyler's loyalty. Then the maid of honor, a sleek blonde who worked with Melanie at the law firm, shared stories about girls' trips and professional victories. Finally, Melanie stood to give her own toast. She was radiant, confident, holding her champagne glass like she was presenting evidence to a jury. "I have to thank everyone who made this day possible," she began, her voice carrying clearly across the room. "Tyler's parents, who welcomed me with open arms. My incredible friends who planned the most amazing bachelorette weekend. My colleagues who covered for me while I was planning this perfect day." She paused, scanning the crowd with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "And I especially want to thank everyone who understood that today needed to be about just Tyler and me. About starting our new life without any unnecessary drama or complications." Another pause, deliberately dramatic. "Honestly, thank God she didn't come. Can you imagine if we'd had to deal with that today?" The guests laughed, raising their glasses in agreement. They had no idea who she was, but they laughed anyway because Melanie had that effect on people. But I knew exactly who she meant. I set down my untouched champagne and walked quietly toward the exit. No one noticed me leave, just as no one had noticed me arrive. Outside in the parking lot, I sat in my car for a long time, watching through the windows as the reception continued without the unnecessary complication of my presence. That night, I went home to my empty house and made a decision that would change everything. I pulled out a bottle of Harold's best whiskey and poured myself 3 fingers worth. Then I opened my laptop and began researching. If Melanie thought I was just going to disappear quietly, she was about to learn how wrong she could be. After all, she'd inherited Harold's charm, but she'd clearly forgotten I'd inherited his ruthlessness. The wedding gift I'd prepared months ago sat wrapped in my closet. Inside that beautiful silver box was something that would reveal every secret Melanie thought she'd buried with her father. But first, I needed to understand exactly what those secrets were. Sunday morning brought coffee, determination, and a banker's box full of documents I'd avoided sorting through since Harold's death. If Melanie wanted to play games about family, she was about to discover I'd been keeping score longer than she realized. I spread Harold's papers across my dining room table like evidence at a crime scene, which in a way they were. 3 years of carefully avoiding this task had seemed like grief, but now I wondered if it had been willful blindness. The first folder contained Harold's will, which I knew by heart. Everything to me, with provisions for Melanie only after my death. Simple, straightforward, exactly what we'd discussed. But underneath were documents I'd never seen before. Codicils, amendments, legal forms with Melanie's signature as witness. My coffee grew cold as I read through modifications made in Harold's final year. Provisions I'd never discussed with him. Changes that gave Melanie power of attorney over certain accounts in case of Dorothy's incapacity. Language that was suspiciously specific about mental health evaluations and medical decisions. Harold had been sharp until the very end. Why would he sign documents preparing for my incompetence when I'd never shown any signs of decline? I pulled out my phone and dialed Dr. Peterson, Harold's longtime physician who'd also become mine. He answered on the third ring, sounding surprised to hear from me on a Sunday. "Dorothy, how are you holding up? I keep meaning to check in." "I'm fine, Tom, but I have a question about Harold's final year. Did you ever have concerns about my mental state? Did anyone suggest I might need assistance with decisions?" A long pause. "Why do you ask?" "I'm finding some legal documents that suggest Harold was worried about my capacity. I don't remember any such concerns." "Dorothy, your husband never mentioned any issues with your mental sharpness." "Quite the opposite. He was always bragging about how you kept everything organized, how you managed all the finances." Another pause. "Are you sure these documents are legitimate?" That question hung in the air long after we ended the call. I returned to the papers with new eyes, looking for details I'd missed. The signatures looked right, but the dates bothered me. Some of these amendments were made on days I clearly remembered spending with Harold at his appointments. Days when Melanie had insisted on driving us, claiming she wanted to help. I found Harold's old appointment calendar in the same box. Cross-referencing dates revealed something interesting. Every document modification had been completed on days when Melanie had been present at doctor visits, handling paperwork, helping with insurance forms. My daughter, the estate planning attorney, had certainly been helpful. I spent the afternoon photographing every document, creating digital copies I could study more carefully. The deeper I dug, the more questions arose. Insurance policies with Melanie listed as sole beneficiary that I'd never authorized. Investment accounts I couldn't find statements for. Real estate documents for properties I'd never heard of. By evening, I had a clear picture of what had been happening. Melanie hadn't just inherited Harold's charm. She'd inherited his assets, systematically and legally, using her legal expertise to create a financial maze that would take months to unravel. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd assumed I was too grief-stricken and trusting to ask questions. I poured another whiskey and opened my laptop again. This time, I wasn't researching Melanie's legal career. I was researching something much more personal. The private investigator who'd helped Harold with a business matter years ago. A man who specialized in financial fraud and had maintained his license even in retirement. Detective Ray Mathis answered on the second ring, his voice gravelly but alert despite the late hour. "Ray, this is Dorothy Winters, Harold's widow." "Dorothy, I was sorry to hear about Harold. Good man, one of the best. What can I do for you?" "I think my daughter has been stealing from me, and I think she started before Harold died." Ray listened as I explained what I'd found, asking pointed questions about timelines and documents. His silence grew more thoughtful as I detailed Melanie's involvement in Harold's final medical care. "Dorothy, this sounds like sophisticated elder fraud, the kind that takes planning and legal knowledge. How much money are we talking about?" I pulled up the bank statements I'd finally forced myself to review. "In the last 3 years, Probably close to $200,000, maybe more. That's felony territory. But proving it will require forensic accounting, especially if she's been clever about documentation. She's very clever, top of her law school class. Well, Ray said with grim satisfaction, it's been a while since I've worked a case this interesting. When can we meet? As I hung up the phone, I felt something I hadn't experienced since the night Harold died. Purpose, direction, the sharp focus that had made me an excellent executive secretary for 30 years. Melanie thought she'd neutralized the unnecessary complication of her mother. She was about to discover that some complications become more dangerous when cornered. The wedding gift in my closet could wait another day. First, I needed to understand exactly how deep my daughter's betrayal ran. Then I would decide how completely to destroy the life she'd built on stolen foundations. After all, she was right about one thing. This was about starting a new life. Mine. Monday morning found me in Ray Mathis's office, a cramped space above a diner that smelled like bacon grease and justice. Ray looked older than his 70 years, but his eyes were sharp as he spread my documents across his desk, like a cardiologist reading an EKG. Your daughter's good, he said, after an hour of silent review. This isn't amateur hour. She's created layers of legal justification for every transfer, every account change. On paper, it looks like Harold was systematically reorganizing his affairs before his death. But, I prompted, hearing the skepticism in his voice, but the timing's too convenient. These changes accelerated significantly after Harold's cancer diagnosis. And look at this. He pointed to a series of investment transfers. These happened during a 2-week period when Harold was receiving radiation treatment. According to his medical records, he was dealing with severe fatigue and cognitive fog from the medication. I remembered those weeks. Harold had been barely functional, sleeping 18 hours a day, confused about basic things like what day it was. Melanie had insisted on handling all the boring paperwork so I could focus on his care. There's more, Ray continued, pulling out a folder I hadn't seen before. I ran a preliminary check on some of these account numbers. 3 of them don't exist anymore. The money was transferred out within months of your husband's death. My hands trembled as I reached for the papers. Where did it go? That's where it gets interesting. Some went to offshore accounts that are difficult to trace, but some went to very specific places. Ray pulled out a highlighted bank statement. A down payment on a house in Tyler's name only. Law school loan payments for someone named Brian Fletcher, and a rather substantial payment to something called Riverside Country Club. The wedding venue, I whispered. Your daughter funded her own wedding with your money, and from the looks of these records, she's been planning this systematic theft for over 2 years. The room felt cold despite the June heat outside. How much? So far, I can trace about $400,000, but Dorothy, this is just what I can see with a basic search. A forensic accountant would likely find more. $400,000. Harold's life insurance, our retirement savings, money we'd planned to use for travel, for spoiling grandchildren, for the comfortable old age we'd earned after 40 years of hard work. Can we prove it in court? Ray leaned back in his chair, studying me with the expression of a man who'd seen too many family tragedies. Probably, but it'll take time, cost money, and destroy what's left of your relationship with your daughter. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Saturday night, sitting alone in my car while Melanie celebrated my absence. About 3 years of being treated like an inconvenience while she systematically robbed me. About the toast that still echoed in my head. Thank God she didn't come. Ray, my relationship with my daughter has been dead for longer than I wanted to admit. She just made it official at her wedding. All right then, but I want to be thorough before we take legal action. Let me do some deeper digging. Maybe bring in that forensic accountant I mentioned. In the meantime, I want you to do something for me. He handed me a small device that looked like a USB drive. This is a digital recorder. If Melanie contacts you, and she will, especially if she realizes you're asking questions, I want you to record your conversations. People who steal from family members usually can't resist gloating when they think they've won. I slipped the device into my purse. What makes you think she'll contact me? Because she's not done yet. $400,000 is a lot of money, but you're still sitting on the bulk of your husband's estate. The house, the remaining investments, his pension. She'll want that too, eventually. As if summoned by his words, my phone buzzed with a text message. Melanie's name appeared on the screen, and my heart rate spiked. Mom, Tyler and I want to take you to lunch this week, to apologize for the confusion about the wedding. Can you do Thursday, 1 p.m. at Chez Laurent? I showed Ray the message. He smiled, but it wasn't a pleasant expression. Chez Laurent, expensive place, public setting, neutral territory. She's going to make an offer. Probably frame it as concern for your well-being, maybe suggest you're getting forgetful, having trouble managing things on your own. How do you know? Because that's step 2 in elder fraud. First, you take what you can quietly. Then you convince everyone, including the victim, that the victim can't handle their own affairs. After that, legal guardianship is just paperwork. The pieces clicked into place with nauseating clarity. The legal documents preparing for my incapacity. The carefully timed thefts during Harold's illness when I was distracted. The gradual distancing. The subtle undermining of my confidence. Melanie hadn't just stolen my money. She'd been systematically setting up a framework to steal everything else. I texted back, "Thursday sounds lovely. Looking forward to catching up." Ray nodded approvingly. "Good. By Thursday, I should have more information about where your money went and how she moved it. In the meantime, don't change your routine. Don't let on that you suspect anything." "And Dorothy?" "Yes? The wedding gift you mentioned. What's in it?" I hadn't told him about the gift, had barely thought about it myself since Saturday night. But now, with everything I'd learned, its contents took on new significance. Harold's private papers, things he kept separate from the business files, personal correspondence, old legal documents, some family photos. I paused. And a sealed envelope he made me promise to give Tyler if anything ever happened to Melanie's marriage. Ray's eyebrows rose. Harold knew something. I think Harold knew a lot of things. He just died before he could warn me about them. The wedding gift that had sat unopened in my closet for 3 months suddenly seemed less like a gesture of maternal love and more like Harold's final attempt to protect someone he'd cared about. The question was whether that someone was Tyler or me. Thursday arrived with unseasonably cool weather and my first clear understanding of exactly how much my daughter hated me. I wore my best dress, the burgundy one Harold had loved, and tucked Ray's recording device into my purse like a weapon I wasn't sure I was brave enough to use. Chez Laurent occupied the top floor of downtown's most expensive hotel, with windows overlooking the river and prices that reflected the view. Melanie was already seated when I arrived, looking polished and professional in a navy suit that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Tyler sat beside her, genuinely smiling when he saw me. "Dorothy." He stood to hug me, and I felt a stab of guilt for what was coming. "You look wonderful. I'm so sorry about the wedding mix-up." Mix-up, such a tidy word for deliberate exclusion. "It's fine, honey. These things happen." I settled into my chair and smiled at my daughter. "Melanie, you look lovely. Marriage suits you." She had the grace to look uncomfortable for about 3 seconds before slipping back into lawyer mode. "Thanks, Mom. We actually wanted to talk to you about something important." The waiter appeared, hovering with the kind of attentiveness that expensive restaurants train into their staff. We ordered salads for Melanie and me, something complicated with duck for Tyler, and made small talk until the food arrived. But I could see Melanie checking her watch, building up to whatever speech she'd prepared. "Mom," she began as I reached for my recording device under the table. "Tyler and I have been talking, and we're worried about you." "Worried how?" Tyler shifted uncomfortably. "Well, you've seemed a little scattered lately since Dad died, which is completely understandable," he added quickly. "Grief affects everyone differently." "Scattered," I repeated, activating the recorder. "In what way?" Melanie took over, her voice gentle but condescending. "Little things, forgetting conversations we've had, asking the same questions multiple times, not keeping track of your finances the way you used to." That was rich, coming from the woman who'd been stealing my finances for 2 years. "I've been keeping track of my finances just fine. Have you?" Melanie pulled out a manila folder. "Because I've been trying to help you organize Dad's paperwork, and I'm finding some concerning gaps. Missing statements, unfiled documents, investment accounts that don't seem to be properly managed." She spread papers across the table with practiced efficiency. Bank statements, investment summaries, insurance documents, all legitimate, all showing the kinds of minor inconsistencies that would look suspicious to someone who didn't know they were being systematically robbed. These are pretty serious red flags, Mom. The kind of thing that suggests someone might be having trouble managing complex financial decisions. Tyler was studying the papers with growing concern. Dorothy, some of these numbers don't match up. This investment account shows transactions you probably don't remember making. I looked at the documents, recognizing them as evidence of Melanie's theft, presented as evidence of my incompetence. The audacity was breathtaking. You're right, I said calmly. I don't remember making those transactions. Relief flickered across Melanie's face. See? This is exactly what we're worried about. Mom, there's no shame in admitting when things become too much to handle alone. What are you suggesting? Tyler reached across the table to squeeze my hand. We think it might be time to consider getting some help. Someone to assist with the financial management, maybe look into some senior living options that would take the pressure off. Senior living. I kept my voice level. You mean a nursing home? Not necessarily, Melanie said quickly. There are wonderful independent living communities. Places where you'd have support but still maintain your autonomy. Places that cost about $4,000 a month, I said, which would require liquidating most of my remaining assets. Mom, you can't put a price on safety and peace of mind. The irony of my daughter lecturing me about protecting assets was almost funny. Almost. And who would manage those liquidated assets? Another glance between them. Well, obviously we'd want to help, Tyler said. Melanie handles this kind of thing professionally, and I could oversee any major decisions. So you're suggesting I give up my house, my independence, and control of my finances because you think I'm having memory problems. We're suggesting you accept help before these problems get worse, Melanie said. Mom, I know this is hard to hear, but denial is common in early-stage dementia. Dementia. She'd actually said it. Has Dr. Peterson diagnosed me with dementia? Dr. Peterson hasn't seen the financial evidence we have, Melanie replied smoothly. But I've spoken with several colleagues who specialize in elder law, and they agree this pattern of financial confusion is concerning. Which colleagues? Mom, that's not really relevant. The point is, I'd like their names. I pulled out my phone. I'd like to call them and discuss these concerns myself. Melanie's mask slipped just slightly. There's no need to get defensive. We're trying to help you. Are you? I looked directly at Tyler, who was still studying the financial documents with a troubled expression. Tyler, what do you think about all this? He looked up, clearly uncomfortable with the conversation's direction. I think we all want what's best for you. Dorothy, and if Melanie's professional opinion is that these financial patterns are concerning, then maybe we should take that seriously. Poor Tyler. He had no idea he was married to a thief and being used as a prop in her performance. I'll tell you what, I said, signaling the waiter for the check. Let me think about everything you've said. It's a lot to process. Of course, Melanie said, relief evident in her voice. Take all the time you need. But Mom, don't wait too long. Some of these financial irregularities could get worse if they're not addressed soon. I paid the check, despite Tyler's protests, and hugged them both goodbye. As I walked to my car, I could hear Melanie's voice carrying across the parking lot, probably already planning the next phase of her campaign to declare me incompetent. But she'd made a critical error. She'd shown me exactly how she planned to justify stealing everything else I owned, and she'd done it in front of her husband, who genuinely believed he was helping a confused old woman instead of enabling grand theft. That evening, I called Ray and played him the recording. His low whistle told me everything I needed to know. She's good, he said, but she's also desperate. This is moving faster than I expected, which means she needs money quickly. Something's pressuring her. What do you mean? People don't accelerate elder fraud unless they're facing a deadline. Bills, debts, something that requires immediate cash. I'll dig deeper into her finances, see what's driving the urgency. After hanging up, I sat in Harold's old chair and stared at the wedding gift still waiting in my closet. Tomorrow, I would finally open Harold's sealed envelope and learn what he'd known about Melanie that he'd never had the chance to tell me. Tonight, I just wanted to sit in the gathering darkness and grieve for the daughter I'd thought I had before I completely destroyed the daughter I'd actually raised. Friday morning, I finally opened Harold's sealed envelope and discovered my husband had been protecting more than just my feelings. The documents inside revealed that Melanie's theft wasn't just about money, it was about covering up the kind of professional misconduct that could destroy her career and send her to prison. The first document was a copy of a complaint filed with the State Bar Association. Someone named Brian Fletcher, the same name I'd seen receiving loan payments from my stolen money, had accused Melanie of misappropriating client funds from his divorce settlement. The complaint was detailed, specific, and damning. According to Fletcher's statement, Melanie had been his attorney during a complicated divorce involving significant assets. The settlement should have left him with $120,000. Instead, he'd received $30,000 and a series of excuses about court fees, legal complications, and delayed transfers. When he'd demanded an accounting, Melanie had provided documents that Fletcher claimed were falsified. The second document was even more damaging. A private investigator's report Harold had commissioned 6 months before his death. It detailed a pattern of client fund mismanagement spanning 2 years, involving at least 4 other cases. The amounts varied, but the method was consistent. Melanie would delay settlement distributions, claim various fees and complications, then transfer the money to accounts under her control. The total estimated theft from clients, nearly $300,000. No wonder she'd needed money quickly. The Bar Association complaint would trigger an audit of her trust accounts. If she couldn't replace the stolen client funds before that audit, she'd face disbarment, criminal charges, and financial ruin. My stolen inheritance wasn't just funding her lifestyle, it was keeping her out of prison. The final document in Harold's envelope was a letter addressed to me, dated a week before his death. Dorothy, if you're reading this, it means something has happened to me and Melanie is likely in serious trouble. I've known about her professional problems for months, but I didn't want to burden you while dealing with my illness. I hired an investigator, hoping we could find a way to help her without destroying her career. I was wrong to keep this from you, but I couldn't bear to tell you that our daughter had become a thief. I pray she finds a way to make this right before it's too late. The money in our accounts belongs to you, not to her mistakes. Protect yourself. Love, Harold. Harold had known. He'd known everything and died carrying the weight of our daughter's crimes. The modifications to his will, the legal documents giving Melanie access to accounts, he'd signed them under duress, probably hoping to buy time for her to fix what she'd broken. Instead, she'd accelerated her theft and expanded it to include systematic fraud against her own mother. I photographed everything and called Ray immediately. Jesus, Dorothy. This changes everything. If she's stealing client funds, we're not just talking about family dysfunction. This is wire fraud, embezzlement, professional misconduct, federal charges territory. What do? We call the FBI, today. But first, I want to understand exactly how much danger you're in. If she's desperate enough to steal from clients and family, she might be desperate enough to do something more drastic to protect herself. That afternoon, Ray accompanied me to the FBI field office downtown. Agent Sarah Collins, a woman about Melanie's age with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense manner, listened to our story with growing interest. Mrs. Winters, what you're describing is a complex financial fraud scheme involving both elder abuse and attorney misconduct. We'll need to coordinate with the State Bar Association, the U.S. Attorney's Office, and local authorities. She spread out our documents, studying Harold's investigator's report with particular attention. This private investigator, is he still alive? Yes. Ray knows him personally. Good. We'll need his testimony about the client fund investigation. Mrs. Winters, I have to ask, are you prepared for what this means? Your daughter will likely face federal charges. If convicted, she's looking at significant prison time. I thought about Thursday's lunch, about Melanie's calm presentation of fabricated evidence, about her plan to have me declared incompetent so she could steal everything Harold had left me. Agent Collins, my daughter stopped being my daughter the moment she decided I was just another victim to steal from. Whatever happens to her now, she brought on herself. Agent Collins nodded. All right, but I want you to understand that this investigation will take time. Meanwhile, you're potentially in danger. If your daughter realizes you've discovered her crimes, she might escalate her attempts to gain control of your finances. What do you suggest? For now, change all your account passwords, Contact your bank about additional security measures and document any contact she has with you. And Mrs. Winters, don't let her know you suspect anything. Not yet. That evening, I sat in my living room with a glass of wine and Harold's wedding gift. Inside the silver box were the documents I'd just shown the FBI, along with something I hadn't given them. A USB drive labeled, "For Tyler," in Harold's handwriting. I plugged it into my laptop and found a video file. Harold's face appeared on screen, gaunt from cancer treatment, but alert and determined. "Tyler, if you're watching this, it means Dorothy has decided you need to know the truth about Melanie. I'm recording this because I may not live long enough to tell you myself. What I'm about to say will be difficult to hear, but you need to know what kind of woman you married before she destroys your life the way she's destroyed her mother's." The video was 15 minutes long. Harold laid out everything: the client thefts, the bar association complaint, Melanie's systematic fraud against our family accounts. He provided dates, amounts, account numbers. He explained how Melanie had manipulated him into signing documents during his illness, how she'd used his cancer treatment as cover for financial theft. Most damaging of all, he revealed something I hadn't known. Melanie had forged my signature on several documents, including a power of attorney that would have given her complete control over my assets after Harold's death. "Tyler," Harold said at the end of the recording, "I know you love her, but the woman you married is capable of crimes that would shock you. Don't let her do to you what she's done to us. Protect yourself before it's too late." I sat in the darkness long after the video ended, understanding finally why Harold had wanted Tyler to receive this gift. He'd known that Melanie would eventually turn on her husband the same way she'd turned on us. Tyler's name being the only one on their house deed wasn't an oversight. It was protection against Melanie's inevitable fraud. My son-in-law was about to discover that his wife was a criminal, and I was going to be the one to tell him. The only question was whether I should warn him before or after the FBI arrested her. Saturday evening, I invited Tyler for dinner under the pretense of wanting to apologize for being distant since the wedding. I served Harold's favorite pot roast and tried not to think about how this meal would end Tyler's marriage and possibly his faith in human nature. He arrived with flowers and that genuine smile that made me understand why Melanie had targeted him. Tyler was successful, trusting, and ethically sound. Everything she needed in a husband to maintain her professional reputation while she committed felonies behind the scenes. "Dorothy, you didn't need to go to all this trouble," he said, helping me carry dishes to the dining room. "I'm just glad we're talking again. Melanie was worried you were upset about the wedding." "Was she?" I set down the potatoes with perhaps more force than necessary. "What exactly did she think I might be upset about?" Tyler's expression grew uncomfortable. "Well, the invitation mix-up, obviously. And maybe the lunch conversation on Thursday. She said you seemed a little overwhelmed by our suggestions about getting help." Overwhelmed. Another tidy word for a messy reality. "Tyler, before we eat, there's something I need to show you. Something Harold left for you before he died." I handed him the wrapped silver box, watching his face change from confusion to concern as he read the inscription. "For Tyler, the truth about Melanie. Open when Dorothy thinks you're ready. Love, Harold." Tyler set the box down carefully. "Dorothy, what is this about?" "Harold discovered something about Melanie before he died. Something he thought you should know, but hoped you'd never need to know. I've been deciding for months whether to give this to you. What changed your mind?" I met his eyes directly. "Thursday's lunch, when she tried to convince both of us that I'm developing dementia so she can take control of my finances." Tyler's face paled. "You think that's what Thursday was about?" "I know that's what Thursday was about, just like I know why she really didn't want me at the wedding, and why your house is in your name only, and why she's been so interested in helping me manage Harold's estate." He opened the box with trembling hands, first pulling out Harold's documents, then finding the USB drive. "What's on this?" "Harold's final message to you. His explanation of what he discovered about your wife." Tyler stared at the drive like it might explode. "Dorothy, are you sure about this? Once I know something, I can't unknow it." "That's exactly what Harold said in his letter to me. But Tyler, ignorance isn't protection when the person you're ignorant about is committing felonies with your name attached to them." He plugged the drive into my laptop without another word. We sat together on my sofa, watching Harold explain how Tyler's wife had been systematically stealing from clients and family for over 2 years. Tyler's face went through a progression of emotions: disbelief, confusion, recognition, and finally, a cold fury I'd never seen in him before. When the video ended, Tyler sat in silence for several minutes. Then he asked quietly, "How much did she steal from you?" "At least $400,000, possibly more." "And the client thefts?" "Close to $300,000. Tyler ran his hands through his hair. "The house. Jesus, Dorothy. She made me put the house in my name only because she said it would be better for tax purposes. I thought she was being financially smart. She was being legally smart. Assets in your name can't be seized when she's arrested for embezzlement." "When she's arrested?" Tyler looked at me sharply. "You've reported this?" "I reported it yesterday. The FBI is investigating." Tyler stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. "How long do I have before this becomes public?" "Agent Collins said the investigation could take weeks or months. But Tyler, there's something else you need to know. She's accelerating her theft from me. The lunch on Thursday wasn't the beginning of her plan to have me declared incompetent. It was the middle. She's already created legal justification for most of the money she's stolen, and she's working on taking the rest." "What do you mean?" I pulled out the recording device and played Thursday's conversation. Tyler listened with growing horror as his wife calmly outlined a plan to strip me of my independence and assets under the guise of medical concern. "She's going to have you declared incompetent," he said when the recording ended, "and she wanted me to help her do it. You didn't know what you were being used for, just like you didn't know why she really put the house in your name or why she was so interested in Harold's estate planning." Tyler returned to the sofa, his face gray with shock. "What should I do? Legally? Talk to a divorce attorney immediately. Personally? Get as much distance as possible between yourself and Melanie's crimes before the FBI comes calling. She's my wife. She's a criminal who's been using you as cover for felonies. Tyler, when this comes out, and it will come out, every aspect of your life will be scrutinized. Your finances, your business, your professional licenses. You need to protect yourself." Tyler picked up Harold's letter, reading it again slowly. He really knew all this before he died? He knew enough to try to protect both of us. That's why he made you the sole owner of your house and why he insisted on putting protections in place for my inheritance that Melanie's been systematically circumventing. I need to go home and think about this. Tyler, please be careful. If Melanie realizes you know about her crimes, she might do something desperate. People who steal from family members aren't usually above other forms of betrayal. He hugged me goodbye, and I watched him drive away, carrying the weight of knowledge that would destroy his marriage and probably his trust in love itself. As I cleaned up dinner, my phone buzzed with a text from Melanie. "Mom, I've been thinking about our lunch conversation. Can we meet again early next week? I found some additional documents that might help clarify the financial situation. Tyler agrees we should move forward with getting you some assistance." I stared at the message, understanding that my daughter had no idea her world was about to collapse. She was still planning my systematic destruction, still confident that she could manipulate both Tyler and me into enabling her crimes. But Tyler now knew the truth. The FBI was building a case, and I had evidence of every lie she'd told and every dollar she'd stolen. Melanie had been right about one thing at her wedding. Someone's life was about to be free of unnecessary complications. It just wasn't going to be mine. Monday morning brought my daughter to my doorstep at 7 a.m., her professional mask completely abandoned in favor of raw fury. Tyler had clearly shared Harold's video with her, and Melanie was no longer pretending to be concerned about my mental health. "You vindictive old bitch!" she snarled the moment I opened the door. "How dare you poison my husband against me?" I stepped aside to let her in, noting how she looked around my living room like she was cataloging assets. Even in crisis, Melanie couldn't stop calculating what she could steal. "I didn't poison anyone, dear. I just shared some family videos. Would you like coffee? Don't you dare act innocent with me." Melanie followed me to the kitchen, her voice rising with each word. "Tyler moved out last night. He took half our wedding gifts and hired a divorce attorney. 20 years of building a life together destroyed because you couldn't let go of ancient history." Ancient history? I poured myself coffee with steady hands, enjoying how my calm demeanor was clearly infuriating her. "Melanie, You stole from me last month. You tried to have me declared incompetent last Thursday. Exactly which part of this constitutes ancient history? I was trying to help you. You're clearly having cognitive issues, and someone needs to protect you from making terrible financial decisions. Like the terrible decision to trust my own daughter? Melanie's face flushed red. Everything I did was legal. Every document was properly executed. Every transfer was justified. You can't prove otherwise. Actually, I can. The FBI seemed quite interested in your creative documentation when I spoke with them Friday. The color drained from Melanie's face so quickly, I thought she might faint. You went to the FBI? I went to the FBI, the State Bar Association, and a forensic accountant. Surprisingly, they all found your financial creativity very educational. Melanie sank into a kitchen chair, her lawyer's training finally kicking in. What exactly did you tell them? The truth about the client funds you've been stealing, the forged signatures on my accounts, the systematic theft from Harold's estate. Oh, and the lovely recording from Thursday's lunch where you outlined your plan to steal everything else I own. That conversation was privileged. Mother-daughter communication. I couldn't help laughing. Sweetheart, privilege doesn't apply when the daughter is committing felonies against the mother, but I'm sure you'll have plenty of time to research the finer points of criminal law from your cell. Melanie stood up abruptly, her fury returning. You think you're so clever, don't you? Playing the poor victim, turning everyone against me. But you have no idea what you've started. I started nothing. I simply stopped pretending I didn't know what you'd been doing. Mom, listen to me very carefully. Melanie's voice dropped to the tone she probably used to intimidate opposing counsel. You withdraw those complaints. You tell Tyler it was all a misunderstanding, and you sign over power of attorney to me voluntarily. Do that, and I'll make sure you're comfortable for the rest of your life. And if you don't, I'll destroy you. I'll have you declared incompetent based on this recent erratic behavior. Going to the FBI with paranoid delusions. Trying to sabotage your daughter's marriage. Making wild accusations about financial impropriety. I have witnesses who'll testify about your confusion. Medical experts who'll confirm cognitive decline. I set down my coffee cup and looked at my daughter. Really looked at her. When had she become this stranger? When had love been replaced by such calculating cruelty? Melanie, do you actually believe the lies you're telling? Or do you just hope I'm stupid enough to believe them? What I believe is that you're a bitter old woman who can't stand seeing her daughter succeed. You've been jealous of my career, my marriage, my financial stability. This whole FBI nonsense is just revenge because I didn't give you the attention you think you deserve. Your financial stability that was built on money stolen from me and your clients? Borrowed, not stolen. Everything I took would have been repaid with interest once my investments matured. What investments? Melanie? The house you put in Tyler's name? The offshore accounts Ray traced? Or do you mean the wedding you funded with my inheritance? Melanie's mask slipped again. How do you know about offshore accounts? I know about everything. The Brian Fletcher case? The Bar Association complaint? The other clients you've been stealing from? Harold documented it all before he died. Daddy didn't know anything. Daddy hired a private investigator. He has evidence of every theft, every forged document, every lie you've told for 2 years. Did you really think you were smart enough to fool a man who built a successful business by spotting financial fraud? Melanie was quiet for a long moment, probably calculating her legal exposure and finding the math terrifying. What do you want? She asked finally. Justice, full restitution of every penny you've stolen, voluntary surrender of your law license, and a signed confession that exonerates Tyler from any knowledge of your crimes. And if I do all that, then maybe I'll ask the prosecutor to consider a plea deal that keeps you out of federal prison for more than 5 years. Melanie laughed bitterly. You're not getting any of that. You're a confused old woman making wild accusations against her successful daughter. By the time I'm done with you, no one will believe a word you say. She stood to leave, then turned back with a smile that chilled me to the bone. Oh, and Mom? You might want to check your bank accounts. Sometimes financial institutions freeze assets when there are questions about a client's mental capacity, especially when those questions come from immediate family members who have legitimate concerns about elder abuse. The front door slammed behind her, leaving me with the sudden, terrible understanding that my daughter's threats weren't empty. She still had weapons she hadn't used yet. I called my bank immediately. The customer service representative was apologetic, but firm. My accounts had been flagged for review pending investigation of potential elder financial abuse. The flag had been placed at the request of my daughter, who had provided legal documentation of her concerns about my mental state. Melanie had frozen my access to my own money while planning to steal what remained of it. But she'd made one crucial miscalculation. She assumed I was the same trusting woman who'd believed her lies for 2 years. I wasn't that woman anymore, and I was about to show her exactly what kind of enemy she'd created. By Tuesday evening, Melanie had escalated her campaign beyond anything I'd anticipated. My doctor's office called to schedule a routine cognitive assessment that I'd never requested. The bank informed me that my frozen accounts would remain inaccessible pending a court-ordered competency evaluation. Most disturbing of all, Adult Protective Services arrived at my door with a report of elder self-neglect filed by a concerned family member. The APS caseworker, a tired-looking woman named Janet Morrison, seemed skeptical of the complaint from the moment she walked into my immaculate house and met my obviously functional self. "Mrs. Winters, I have to ask, do you feel unsafe in your home? Are you having trouble managing daily activities or financial decisions?" "Not until my daughter started stealing my money and trying to have me declared incompetent." Janet's eyebrows rose. "Can you elaborate on that?" I showed her the FBI case number, Agent Collins's business card, and Ray's investigative files. I played the recording from Thursday's lunch and explained Melanie's systematic theft of my inheritance. "This is highly unusual," Janet said after reviewing everything. "The complaint describes someone who's confused, neglecting personal hygiene, forgetting to eat. You're clearly none of those things. My daughter is an attorney facing criminal charges for embezzlement. I suspect she's creating false documentation to discredit me before I can testify against her." Janet made detailed notes. "Mrs. Winters, I'm required to complete a full assessment, but I can already tell you this complaint appears to be retaliatory rather than legitimate. However, I want you to know that filing false APS reports is itself a crime." After Janet left, I called Agent Collins to report Melanie's escalating harassment. "Mrs. Winters, what you're describing is witness intimidation and abuse of legal process. We can add those charges to her growing list, but I'm concerned about your immediate safety. People who file false APS reports are often preparing for more serious actions." "What kind of actions?" "The kind that would give them immediate access to your assets if something happened to you." "Mrs. Winters, I want you to consider staying somewhere else for a few days while we expedite our investigation." I thought about running, about hiding from my own daughter like she was some stranger who meant me harm. Then I remembered her smile when she'd told me about freezing my accounts. "Agent Collins, I'm not leaving my home because my daughter has decided to become a criminal, but I will take precautions." That evening, I installed the security system Ray had recommended and gave spare keys to 3 trusted neighbors. I also did something that would have seemed impossible a week ago. I wrote a detailed letter explaining everything I'd discovered, sealed it in an envelope marked "to be opened only in case of my death or incapacitation," and gave it to my attorney with strict instructions. Wednesday brought a call from Tyler, his voice strained with exhaustion. "Dorothy, I need to warn you about something. Melanie's been calling everyone we know, telling them you're having mental health issues and making false accusations against her. She's contacted your neighbors, your book club, even your hairdresser." "What exactly is she saying?" "That grief over Harold's death has made you paranoid and confused. That you're accusing her of theft because you can't remember giving her permission to help with your finances. She's very convincing when she wants to be." I'm sure she was. Melanie had spent her career convincing juries to believe her version of events. "Tyler, how are you holding up?" "Honestly, I feel like my entire marriage was a lie. She tried to convince me you were lying about everything, that Harold's video was somehow fabricated. When I told her I'd seen the bank records myself, she said you'd probably doctored them to frame her. I'm sorry you're going through this. Don't apologize. You saved me from spending my life married to a criminal. Dorothy, there's something else. I hired a forensic accountant to review our joint finances. Melanie's been stealing from me too. Not as much as she took from you, but enough. Credit cards in my name that I never authorized, transfers from our joint account to cover her legal expenses. Of course she had. Once someone decides their family members are just financial resources to be exploited, they rarely limit themselves to one victim. Have you told Agent Collins? I'm meeting with her tomorrow. But Dorothy, I wanted you to know, whatever happens, I'm on your side. Melanie can tell everyone you're crazy, but I know better. Thursday morning brought my court-mandated competency evaluation, conducted by Dr. Patricia Hayes, a geriatric psychiatrist with no patience for time wasters. After 2 hours of cognitive tests, psychiatric interviews, and financial assessments, she delivered her verdict with clinical precision. Mrs. Winters, you are clearly competent to manage your own affairs. Your cognitive function is excellent, your understanding of complex financial matters is sophisticated, and your concerns about your daughter's behavior are well-founded and supported by evidence. I'll be submitting a report that contradicts every claim made in the competency petition. What happens now? Now the court unseals your accounts. Your daughter faces charges for filing false legal documents, and you can proceed with your criminal complaints without interference. I felt something I hadn't experienced since Harold's death. Complete, overwhelming relief. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't looking over my shoulder or questioning my own perceptions. That afternoon, Agent Collins called with news that changed everything. Mrs. Winters, our forensic accountants found something interesting. Your daughter's client fund thefts go back much further than we initially thought. We've identified at least 12 victims over 4 years, with total losses approaching $800,000. $800,000? And that's just what we can prove so far. Mrs. Winters, your daughter isn't just a family criminal. She's been running a sophisticated embezzlement scheme that makes her one of the most prolific attorney thieves in state history. The magnitude of Melanie's crimes was staggering. She hadn't just stolen from me and Tyler. She'd been systematically destroying lives for years, using her legal expertise to cover her tracks and her professional reputation to maintain client trust. There's more, Agent Collins continued. We believe your husband discovered the full scope of her crimes before his death. We found evidence that he was preparing to report her to the FBI himself when he became too ill to follow through. Harold had known everything. He'd known that our daughter was a predator who'd been using her law degree to steal from vulnerable clients, and he'd died trying to stop her. When will you arrest her? Tomorrow morning. We wanted to give you advance notice in case she tries to contact you. Mrs. Winters, it's possible she'll become desperate when she realizes the investigation has expanded. Please be careful. As I hung up the phone, I realized Melanie's time was running out. Tomorrow, she would discover that all her lies, manipulations, and false reports had accomplished nothing except adding more charges to her indictment. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Friday morning, I watched from my kitchen window as FBI agents arrested my daughter in her driveway. Melanie was loading suitcases into her car, apparently planning to run, when Agent Collins and 3 other agents surrounded her with weapons drawn. Even from a distance, I could see Melanie arguing, probably demanding to see warrants and invoking her rights as an attorney. But the agents had done their homework. Within minutes, she was handcuffed and loaded into a federal vehicle while crime scene techs began searching her house. My phone rang immediately. Tyler's voice was shaky but relieved. It's over, Dorothy. They arrested her 20 minutes ago. How are you feeling? Like I can finally breathe again. I've been living in terror that she'd try to involve me in her crimes somehow. Having FBI agents tell me I'm a victim rather than a suspect it's huge. Agent Collins called an hour later with details that made my head spin. Mrs. Winters, your daughter's house was essentially a criminal enterprise headquarters. We found forged documents, client files with altered settlement amounts, and evidence of money laundering through 18 different accounts. She's been charged with wire fraud, embezzlement, forgery, elder abuse, filing false legal documents, and witness intimidation. What happens now? She'll be arraigned this afternoon. Given the flight risk and the severity of the charges, we're recommending she be held without bail. Mrs. Winters, I need to prepare you. This case will likely take months to resolve, and you'll be a key witness. I spent the afternoon watching news coverage of Melanie's arrest. The local stations were having a field day with the story. Prominent attorney accused of stealing nearly $1 million from clients and family. Her law firm had already released a statement expressing shock and suspending her pending investigation. But the real shock came that evening when Tyler arrived at my house with a manila envelope and a shell-shocked expression. "Dorothy, I found something in our house after the FBI finished searching. Hidden in a safe I didn't even know Melanie had." Inside the envelope were documents that made everything else look minor by comparison. Life insurance policies on both Tyler and me that Melanie had taken out without our knowledge. Policies worth $500,000 each, with Melanie as the sole beneficiary. "She was planning to kill us," Tyler said quietly, "or at least hoping we'd die so she could collect." My hands trembled as I read the policy details. Melanie had used forged signatures to obtain coverage, then made premium payments from my stolen money. The policies had been active for 18 months. "Tyler, we need to call Agent Collins immediately." "I already did. She's coming over tonight to collect these and take our statements. Dorothy, there's more." He pulled out a notebook written in Melanie's handwriting. Page after page of calculations, timelines, and what could only be described as murder scenarios. Ways to make deaths look accidental. Research on medications that could cause heart attacks in elderly patients. Inquiries about the statistical likelihood of household accidents for seniors living alone. "She was researching how to kill me," I whispered. "She was researching how to kill both of us and make it look natural. Dorothy, I think the only reason we're still alive is that she thought she could steal everything legally before resorting to murder." Agent Collins arrived within the hour, along with 2 detectives from the homicide unit. They photographed every document, recorded our statements, and explained that Melanie would face additional charges of conspiracy to commit murder and insurance fraud. "Mrs. Winters, Mr. Parker, I want you both to understand the seriousness of this situation. Your daughter spent 18 months planning your deaths while systematically stealing from you. This isn't just financial crime anymore, it's attempted murder. What's the penalty for something like this?" I asked. "If convicted on all charges, she's looking at life in prison without the possibility of parole." After the agents left, Tyler and I sat in my living room, both struggling to process the magnitude of what we'd discovered. "She was going to kill us," Tyler said again, as if repetition would make it comprehensible. "My wife was planning to murder me for insurance money. She stopped being your wife the moment she decided we were worth more dead than alive. How did we miss this? How did I live with someone for years without seeing what she really was?" "Because we loved her," I said. "And people who are capable of love assume others are capable of it too. We couldn't imagine someone we cared about planning our deaths because we're not capable of planning anyone else's death." Tyler nodded slowly. "The divorce attorney I hired said something similar. He deals with high-conflict divorces. And he told me that normal people can't comprehend the thought processes of truly antisocial personalities." "Is that what she is? Antisocial?" "According to 3 different mental health professionals I've consulted, yes. Melanie shows classic signs of antisocial personality disorder. Complete lack of empathy, willingness to harm others for personal gain, and an inability to form genuine emotional connections." I thought about Melanie's childhood, searching for signs I'd missed. Had she always been capable of this level of calculated cruelty, or had something broken in her along the way? "Tyler, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest." "Of course. In all the years you were married to her, did you ever feel like she genuinely loved you? Or did it always feel like you were useful to her in some way?" Tyler was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "I think I was useful. I provided respectability, financial stability, and legal cover for her crimes. I don't think she's capable of loving anyone. I don't think she is either. And Tyler? I don't think she ever was." As Tyler left that night, I realized something that should have been devastating, but instead felt oddly liberating. The daughter I'd grieved losing at her wedding had never existed. I'd been mourning a fiction, a performance Melanie had maintained for 32 years. The real Melanie was a predator who'd viewed her own family as prey. And tomorrow, she would begin paying the price for a lifetime of viewing other people as resources to be exploited, rather than human beings to be cherished. For the first time in months, I slept peacefully. Saturday morning brought the revelation that would rewrite everything I thought I knew about my family. Ray called at 8 a.m. with news that the FBI's expanded investigation had uncovered something that went far beyond Melanie's crimes. Dorothy, you need to sit down for this. The forensic accountants found evidence that Melanie's been stealing from clients for 6 years, not 4. And some of those early thefts were used to pay medical bills that insurance should have covered. What kind of medical bills? Harold's cancer treatment. Dorothy, your husband's insurance was supposed to cover his oncology care, but Melanie somehow manipulated the claims so they were denied. Then she used stolen client funds to pay the bills privately. I felt the world shift around me. Why would she do that? Because she was betting Harold would die before anyone discovered the insurance fraud. She'd stolen the money, used it to pay bills that should have been covered, and planned to hide the whole scheme in grief paperwork after his death. But Harold lived longer than expected. Exactly. And that's when she had to escalate the client thefts to cover the original crimes. Dorothy, she's been in a financial spiral for years, stealing more and more to cover previous thefts. I hung up and immediately called Dr. Peterson. Tom, I need to ask you about Harold's insurance claims during his cancer treatment. Were there problems with coverage approval? A long pause. Dorothy, I've been wondering when you'd ask about that. Harold's insurance should have covered everything, but there were persistent claim denials that I never understood. Your daughter handled all the insurance communications, and she assured me the bills were being paid. Did Harold know about the denials? I don't think so. Melanie told us she was handling everything with the insurance company, that the claims were just taking time to process. Harold was too sick to deal with paperwork, and you were focused on his care. Everything clicked into place, with sickening clarity. Melanie hadn't just stolen my inheritance after Harold's death. She'd been using stolen money to pay for his care while he was dying, betting that he wouldn't live long enough for anyone to discover her crimes. When Harold survived longer than expected, she'd had to steal more to cover the original thefts. When he'd discovered her client fund embezzlement, she'd manipulated him into signing legal documents that would give her access to our accounts. And when he'd threatened to expose her, she'd... What? I called Agent Collins immediately. Agent Collins, I need you to look into something. Harold's medical care during his final year. I think Melanie may have been stealing from clients to pay bills that insurance should have covered. We're already investigating Harold's medical records. Mrs. Winters, there's something else we need to discuss. Can you come to the office this afternoon? The FBI field office felt different this time, more serious, more ominous. Agent Collins led me to a conference room where a man I didn't recognize was waiting with a thick file. Mrs. Winters, this is Detective Mike Reeves from the Homicide Unit. We need to ask you some questions about your husband's death. My blood went cold. Harold died of cancer. Yes, ma'am, but we're investigating whether his death was accelerated. Detective Reeves opened the file, revealing medical records, prescription logs, and insurance documents. Mrs. Winters, Harold's oncologist, noted some unusual changes in his condition during his final weeks. Symptoms that weren't consistent with his cancer progression. What kind of symptoms? Cardiac irregularities, digestive issues, neurological changes. Symptoms consistent with certain types of poisoning. Agent Collins leaned forward. Mrs. Winters, we found research in Melanie's notes about medications that could cause heart failure in cancer patients. Research that was conducted 6 months before Harold's death. You think she killed him? We think she may have administered substances that hastened his death. The insurance fraud was getting harder to hide. Harold was asking questions about the client fund thefts, and he was living longer than she'd expected. Detective Reeves pulled out a timeline. Look at this sequence of events. Harold discovers her client thefts in February. In March, she manipulates him into signing power of attorney documents. In April, his condition suddenly deteriorates despite stable cancer markers. He dies in May, just days before he was scheduled to meet with the FBI about her crimes. I stared at the timeline, remembering Harold's final weeks, how he'd seemed to be improving, talking about treatment options and future plans. Then suddenly, he'd taken a turn for the worse. Melanie had been so attentive during those final days, bringing him special meals, managing his medications, insisting I needed rest. Can you prove this? We're exhuming Harold's body next week for toxicology testing. Modern testing can detect poisons that wouldn't have been looked for during his original autopsy. Mrs. Winters, Agent Collins said gently, if Harold was murdered, Melanie faces the death penalty. Are you prepared for that possibility? I thought about Harold lying in his hospital bed, trusting his daughter to care for him while she systematically destroyed our family's finances. I thought about him signing documents under duress, trying to protect me from crimes he didn't fully understand. I thought about him dying believing he'd failed to stop Melanie's theft, never knowing she might be actively killing him. If she murdered her own father to cover up her crimes, then yes, I'm prepared for her to face whatever consequences the law allows. Detective Reeves nodded. We'll know more after the exhumation. But Mrs. Winters, I want you to understand, if Harold was murdered, this case becomes much bigger. Murder during the commission of a felony, especially murder of a family member for financial gain, carries the harshest penalties our legal system allows. As I drove home that afternoon, I realized that Melanie's crimes had no bottom. She hadn't just stolen money or planned our deaths. She may have actually murdered the man who'd raised her, loved her, and tried to protect her from the consequences of her own actions. Harold had died believing he'd failed to save his daughter from herself. He'd never known that his daughter was beyond saving, beyond love, beyond any human emotion except greed and calculated cruelty. But he'd also died leaving behind evidence that would ultimately destroy her. Even in death, Harold was still protecting his family. The irony was almost poetic. Melanie had killed the one person who might have helped her avoid the consequences she was about to face. 3 weeks later, I sat in federal court, watching my daughter sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for the murder of Harold Winters, her own father. The toxicology results had been damning. Harold's body contained lethal levels of digitalis, a heart medication that Melanie had been slowly poisoning him with during his final month. The judge's words echoed in the silent courtroom. Ms. Winters, you have shown a level of calculated cruelty toward your own family that defies comprehension. You stole from clients who trusted you. You systematically robbed your mother while she grieved your father. And you murdered the man who raised you to cover up your crimes. This court can find no mitigating factors that would justify anything less than life imprisonment. Melanie stood motionless as the sentence was pronounced, her lawyer's mask finally and permanently in place. She never looked at me, never showed any emotion beyond cold calculation. Even facing life in prison, she remained what she'd always been, a predator evaluating her options. Tyler sat beside me, his own closure finally complete. The divorce had been finalized the week before, with Tyler keeping the house and all legitimate assets, while everything connected to Melanie's crimes was seized for victim restitution. It's over, he whispered, as court officers led Melanie away in shackles. Yes, I agreed. It finally is. Outside the courthouse, Agent Collins approached with the kind of smile that indicated good news. Mrs. Winters, I wanted you to know that we've recovered most of your stolen money. Between asset seizures and insurance payouts, you should get back about 80% of what she took. What about her other victims? They'll receive full restitution from the Client Protection Fund. No one else will suffer permanent financial loss because of her crimes. As we walked to our cars, Tyler asked the question I'd been wondering about myself. What happens now? How do you move forward after something like this? I thought about Harold's letter, about his hope that Melanie would find a way to make things right. I thought about the 32 years I'd spent loving a daughter who'd never existed, grieving a relationship that had been built on lies from the beginning. I said finally, I'm going to travel. Harold and I always planned to see Europe after he retired. We never got the chance because of his cancer, but there's no reason I can't go now. That sounds wonderful. Tyler, I want you to know something. You're the best thing that came out of Melanie's life. Even if she wasn't capable of appreciating what she had, you're a good man, and you deserve happiness. Tyler hugged me goodbye, and I realized that losing a criminal daughter had gained me something unexpected. A son-in-law who'd proven his character under the worst possible circumstances. 6 months later, I sent Tyler a postcard from Rome. On the front was a picture of the Trevi Fountain. On the back, I'd written, throwing coins and making wishes for genuine new beginnings. Harold would have loved this. Hope you're well. Love, Dorothy. Tyler's response arrived at my hotel the next week. Dorothy, I'm engaged to a wonderful woman named Sarah who knew about everything before she agreed to marry me. She says anyone who could survive Melanie and come out stronger is exactly the kind of mother-in-law she wants. We'd love for you to be part of our wedding. as an honored guest this time. P.S. Sarah insists on a prenup. She says she learned from your example that protecting yourself financially isn't unromantic, it's practical. I laughed until I cried, standing in my Roman hotel room overlooking the city Harold had dreamed of visiting. Some stories end with revenge, others with justice. The best ones end with the understanding that love, real love, not the manipulative performance Melanie had specialized in, always finds a way to heal what seemed beyond repair. Melanie had been right about one thing at her wedding. Someone's life had become free of unnecessary complications. She'd just been wrong about whose life she was describing. The unnecessary complication had been her. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.